Let me tell you about the time I accidentally crashed a wedding in New Orleans. This happened a couple of years ago when I was visiting the city for the first time, ready to soak up all the jazz, beignet, and Bourbon Street vibes. I was traveling solo, which, if you know me, is a recipe for chaos because I have the navigational skills of a lost puppy and the decision-making of a toddler hyped up on sugar. It was a Saturday night, and I was wandering around the French Quarter, already a little tipsy from a few hurricanes at a bar on Decatur Street. The streets were buzzing, street performers, tourists, and that unmistakable New Orleans energy. I was having the time of my life. But here's the thing. When I drink, I get this weird urge to explore. And by explore, I mean wander aimlessly until I'm hopelessly lost. That night, I'd left my phone charging at the hostel because, apparently, I thought I was living in the 1800s. So, no GPS, no map, just me and my questionable instincts. After about 45 minutes of strolling down random streets, I realized I had no clue where I was. The jazz music was fading, the crowds were thinning, and I was pretty sure I'd crossed into a part of town that wasn't exactly tourist central. But then, I heard it. Lively brass band music, the kind that makes you want to dance even if you're sober. I followed the sound like it was a siren's call, and soon I stumbled upon this gorgeous old building with fairy lights and flowers spilling out the front. People were dressed to the nines, laughing, and spilling onto the sidewalk. I thought, oh, this must be some kind of open-air party or festival. I mean, it's New Orleans. Parties are basically a public service, right? So, in my hurricane-fueled confidence, I waltzed right in. No one stopped me. The place was packed with people dancing, drinking, and eating what looked like the best shrimp étouffée I'd ever seen. I grabbed a plate, because free food, and started chatting with some folks at a table. They were super friendly, asking me how I knew Lila and Marcus. I had no idea who Lila and Marcus were, but I'm a talkative drunk, so I just said, "Oh, you know, from around," and kept stuffing my face. They laughed, handed me a glass of champagne, and I was like, this is the best party ever. Now, I should mention I'm your average broke 20-something, rocking a t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. Everyone else was in suits, dresses, and sparkly heels, but I was too buzzed to notice the stares. I hit the dance floor, trying to second line with the band, probably looking like a drunk giraffe. That's when things got weird. A woman in a stunning white dress, yep, a wedding dress, tapped me on the shoulder. She was smiling, but her eyes said, "Who the hell are you?" She asked, "Are you with the band?" I froze, mid-dance move, and said, No, I just heard the music." Her smile faltered, and I started to piece it together. This wasn't a public party. I'd crashed a wedding. Most people would have bolted, but I'm not most people. I'm the kind of idiot who doubles down. I apologized profusely, explained I was a lost tourist, and for some reason, I started telling her about my night, how I'd gotten lost, left my phone behind, and just wanted to find some fun. To my shock, she laughed. Like, genuinely laughed. She introduced herself as Lila, the bride, and said, "You're staying. Anyone who dances like that deserves to party." I couldn't believe it. The groom, Marcus, came over, and after a quick side-eye, he handed me a beer and said, "Just don't break anything." So, there I was, officially invited to a stranger's wedding. I spent the next couple of hours dancing, eating cake, and chatting with guests who thought my story was hilarious. I even got into a deep conversation with the bride's uncle, who was a jazz musician. He told me about his days playing in dive bars, and how he almost made it big but got sidetracked by life. I told him he should record his music, and he got all teary-eyed, saying no one had ever pushed him like that. It was oddly wholesome, but the night wasn't without its hiccups. At one point, a very drunk groomsman cornered me, convinced I was some kind of gatecrasher trying to steal the gifts. He was loud, pointing at me, and drawing attention. I thought I was done for. But Lila swooped in, told him to chill, and vouched for me. The guy backed off, mumbling, and I realized how close I'd come to getting tossed out. Or worse, considering he looked like he bench-pressed small cars. As the night wound down, I knew it was time to go. I thanked Lila and Marcus, who were honestly the coolest people ever, and slipped out into the New Orleans night. I still had no phone, but a guest offered to walk me back to the French Quarter, so I didn't get lost again. Looking back, I realize how wild that night could have been. I could have been kicked out, arrested, or worse, but instead, I got a story I'll tell forever. I like to think a little drunken charm and a lot of luck turned a potential disaster into one of the best nights of my life. And somewhere out there, Lila and Marcus probably still laugh about the random guy who crashed their wedding. You know how some memories just hit you out of nowhere? A couple of weeks ago, I was scrolling through old photos on my phone, and I stumbled across one from a camping trip I took when I was about 10. My friend, who I sent it to, got super creeped out when I told her the story behind it. It's one of those things I hadn't thought about in years, but now it's all I can think about. Let me take you back to when this happened. It's a bit hazy since I was young, but the core of it is burned into my brain. My family wasn't big on camping, but that summer, my parents decided we'd join my uncle's family for a weekend in this state park a few hours from our house. It was your typical campground: pine trees, dirt trails, a lake nearby. My cousins, who were around my age, made it fun. We'd spend all day exploring the woods, pretending we were adventurers. The rule was we had to be back at the campsite by dusk, which was fine because I was terrified of the dark back then. My older cousin, Jake, who was maybe 13, loved messing with me, telling me stories about bears or ghosts in the woods. I'd roll my eyes, but deep down, I was spooked. On the second night, we were sitting around the campfire, roasting marshmallows, when Jake dared me to go with him to the edge of the campsite to look for owls. I didn't want to seem like a baby, so I agreed, even though it was pitch black beyond the fire's glow. We grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the trailhead, maybe 50 yards from the tents. The adults were chatting, not paying attention, and I remember feeling this knot in my stomach as the trees swallowed the campfire's light. We were standing there, shining the flashlight into the branches, when Jake suddenly went quiet. He was always loud, so that alone freaked me out. I whispered, "What's wrong?" And he just grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a big tree. My heart was pounding. I had no clue what was happening. He pointed the flashlight toward the trail, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing maybe 20 feet away, right where the path curved into the woods. It was tall, wearing a dark jacket, and its face, I swear, was too pale, like it didn't belong in the shadows. It wasn't moving, just standing there, staring in our direction. I wanted to scream, but Jake clamped his hand over my mouth and whispered, "Don't move." I was shaking, thinking it was one of Jake's pranks, like the time he hid in my closet to scare me. But his face was dead serious, no smirk, no nothing. I peeked around the tree, and the figure was still there, but now it was closer, maybe 10 feet away. I couldn't see its eyes, but I felt like it was looking right at me. My vision was blurry from fear, but I remember its hands hanging limp, fingers twitching slightly, like it was waiting for something. Jake hissed, "Run back to the camp." Now, I didn't need to be told twice. We bolted, tripping over roots, the flashlight bouncing wildly. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind us, but it was silent, just our panting and the crunch of leaves. When we burst into the campsite, the adults jumped up, asking what was wrong. Jake, trying to play it cool, said we just got spooked by a noise, but I could tell he was shaken. I blurted out about the figure, and my dad laughed it off, saying it was probably another camper. But my uncle, who knew the park well, looked uneasy and said nobody should be on that trail at night. We stayed close to the fire the rest of the night, and I barely slept, imagining that pale face outside my tent. The next morning, my uncle went to check the trail with my dad. They came back saying they found footprints, big ones, too big for a kid, leading into the woods but stopping abruptly, like the person just vanished. My uncle mentioned a park ranger had warned him about strange folks hanging around the park that summer, but he didn't elaborate. I was too young to push for details, and honestly, I didn't want to know. The creepiest part? When we were packing up to leave, I noticed something in the dirt near our tent. A small, carved wooden figure, like a crude doll, half buried. I showed it to Jake, and he turned white, saying he'd seen something like it on the trail the night before, but didn't tell me because he thought it was nothing. We threw it into the woods and never spoke about it on the drive home. Years later, I brought it up with Jake, hoping he'd remember more. He's a park ranger now, super practical, and he tried to brush it off as some drifter or a prank by another camper. But when I mentioned the wooden figure, he got quiet and said some parks have weird histories he doesn't like to talk about. I looked up the state park online recently, and there are forum posts about unexplained sightings, pale figures, carved dolls left behind. No solid answers, just stories. It still gives me chills. Was it just some creep in the woods? A ranger playing a prank? Or something else? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to. That photo I found brought it all back, and now I can't stop wondering what we really saw that night.